Welcome to Lincoln Christian Church. My name's Ron Otto. I'm the preaching minister here today. And here's what you need to know before I begin. I had sinuses all week. It's turned into a sinus infection. And this morning I went to the cabinet and I just swallowed all kinds of stuff. And I'm heavily medicated. And I have no memory of what I preached the last 2 hours. So I hope you get something out of today. That will be just great. You remember the story of the Wizard of Oz? You know the story of Dorothy and the Scarecrow and the Tin Man. When they first encounter the Cowardly Lion, he comes out, he's bigger than life. He's very frightening at the beginning. He's hissing and he's growling and everything. And finally, Dorothy reaches her point where she snaps and she slaps him on the snout. Remember that moment? And he jumps back and, "Why'd you have to do that? Why'd you have to do that?" You know, that moment. And she's like, "Wait a minute, you're not so scary. You're nothing but a big coward," she says. And then, you know, he breaks into song. Here we go. It's sad. Wait, where am I at here? It's the medication. It's the medication. It's sad, believe me, missy, when you're born to be a sissy without the fem and firm. I could show my paralysis, be a lion, not a malice, if I only had the nerve. Oh. You are starved for entertainment, let me tell you. Today, we're about to see unmatched courage, unbridled bravery in a couple stories that are found in the Old Testament. First, quick shout out to family and friends who are watching online, to everyone who tunes in each week. That means a lot to us. But my mother-in-law and my brother-in-law are up in Michigan, and a couple nieces, they're all watching today, and they asked for a shout out, so here it is. Hey! I hope I didn't do something bad right now, but there's my gang sign, all right? The series we're in, man, no more drugs for Ron. The series we're in is titled The Story Gets Better. Listen, the whole idea of this, last year reading and just some things that God was doing in my life, it was just, every time I read a story in the Old Testament, I realized that story gets better. The story on its own is too amazing for words. When you just read the story all by itself, it's too amazing for words. However, tucked underneath several of these stories are hidden right in plain sight glimpses of Jesus, things that point us to Jesus. And a lot of times we read stories and we retell stories, and these are great children's stories at night, but we don't always see what's hidden right there in plain sight in front of us. And today that's certainly true, because we're going to share with you two great stories. Both of them are found in the book of Daniel, by the way. It's the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fiery furnace, and then it's the story of Daniel in the lion's den. Now, these are four men. These are four men that all knew each other. Both stories are just amazing stories, but there is a Jesus factor in each one of them. All four of these men, by the way, are not supernatural. They don't have superhuman strength. They don't have supernatural powers. There will be a miracle in their lives, but it won't be caused by them. This isn't Jesus doing miracles, by the way. This isn't Moses putting up the rod and parting a sea. It's nothing like that. They'll receive a miracle. It will come completely from the hand of God. You know these stories really well. So you have to work a little extra hard today to just stay in the story long enough to find out what God is doing. Whenever I get into stories that you know well, it's easy to tune out, rather than stay engaged and get re-amazed. And so you work on getting re-amazed today. These stories happen at a time when you're going through the book of Daniel. There are four kings. It can get a little confusing, by the way, when you're reading the book of Daniel, because the kings are constantly changing. But this is, by the way, these kings have full archaeological support behind them. When people are critical of the Bible anymore, They cannot get critical with the history of the Bible. It's indisputable. The timeline the Bible has laid out now is absolutely correct, and it's been proven over and over again. So all they have left to be critical of is the miracle aspects of the Bible. Anytime there's a supernatural miracle story, then that's when they have a problem. But these 4 kings in Daniel all have archaeological support. Now, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego happen early in the book of Daniel. They're under King Nebuchadnezzar. All right? Later on, Daniel will be under Darius the Mede. He'll be under that king. But for this very first story, you have Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar will begin something that all the other kings will do. When he conquers the land, he doesn't destroy the land and kill all the people. Instead, after he conquers an area, he will incorporate those people into his culture. He'll ask his commanders, bring me the brightest and the smartest individuals in that town, in that area, to us. We're going to introduce them to Babylonian culture, and then they can go back and help transform their communities. They are the Borg of Star Trek. Oh, man, not one fan in here. All right. We will include you into our collective, you know, that kind of thing. That's what's going on inside this story. And Nebuchadnezzar is smart, so he does this thing. Now, when he takes Jerusalem, he brings over these Jewish men. The Jewish men's name, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and Daniel. And they're super sharp. And so they're being introduced to Babylonian culture. Okay? We'll come back to that in a moment. So let's start with this first story, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fiery furnace. King Nebuchadnezzar then, hey, king, this would be awesome. Let's make a great big statue of you. And they did, 9 feet wide, 90 feet tall, made of gold. And then they said, you know what? We ought to force everyone to bow down to your statue. King liked that. So he gets up and he says, all right, here it is. Everyone, all of us are going to bow to my statue. You're going to worship my statue today. I don't care if you have other gods. You're going to bow and worship me today. And when the orchestra kicks off, everyone has to fall to their knees. If you don't, we're going to throw you into a fiery furnace. Well, the orchestra kicks off into song. Everyone. And there's other Jewish people there too, by the way. They all fall to their knees except Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They're pointed out to the king. The king brings them in front of him. He likes these guys, but he's like, why didn't you bow? I told you you had to bow. I'll give you another chance. They won't do it. And then they make the following statement. Now, they're going to be polite, but this is in Daniel 3, verse 17. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it. And, by the way, he will deliver us from the majesty's hand. That means overall he will. But even if he does not, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold that you have set up. We're not going to do it. Our God can save us, but even if he doesn't, I've heard that from some of you sometimes in some of the toughest places. I've heard that from hospital calls. I know my God can heal me today, but even if he doesn't, I'm not going to worship anyone but him. I've watched you do that when you were in a moment of hospice with a loved one. I know that God could save my loved one from this, keep them alive, but even if he doesn't, I'm not worshiping anyone else but him. I've even seen some of you at the side of a grave say, you know what, this didn't turn out the way I wanted it to, but I'm not worshiping anyone else but God. You've said very close to what they said. Our God can save us. He has the ability to rescue us, and even if he doesn't, we're not worshiping that God. Wow. That took some courage. That took some bravery. Well, Nebuchadnezzar has a meltdown. The only thing hotter that day than the king's anger is the furnace, because he has it heated up 7 times hotter than any other time. He has Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego bound up and tied with rope. And he has his strongest soldiers take them up to the front of that furnace and throw them in. The heat from the furnace is so intense that when they push these 3 guys in, the heat kills those soldiers, by the way. And then the king is looking into the flame, and all of a sudden he leaps out of his seat. He's looking into the flame, and he has this observation, verse 24. Look, he says, I see 4 men walking around in the fire. They're unbound and unharmed, and the 4th looks like the Son of God's. Who do you think that 4th one was? The king hasn't been introduced to Jesus yet, and neither has Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, but his description tells you who that was. The king yells into the fire, Shadrach, Meshach, come out. They come out, and by the way, the only thing that burned on them was the ropes. They're gone. They come walking out of the flame, and the king examines them, and they're not hurt, they're not burned, and the Bible says they don't even have the smell of smoke on them. All right, listen, we have a house, no one smokes in our house, but when our teenagers would go out and then they'd come home smelling like smoke, Bonnie would smell it from across the room. All right? Some of you parents, you know exactly why. You know, like, have you been smoking? And it was always the same. Oh, no, it was our friends, you know. And I know right now you're thinking, you know, oh yeah, the preacher's kids. Hey, preacher's kids are that way because they play with elders' kids. All right, there it is. That was not in my notes. Maybe I should not have said that. I don't know. They didn't even smell like smoke. Are you kidding me? They were just in the fire. They didn't even smell like smoke. Secondhand smoke now we know can affect other people. You're not even the one smoking, but secondhand smoke can affect you. Wouldn't that be awesome if that worked out in other ways of our life? Wouldn't it be cool if I could get a secondhand workout? Go to the rec center and there's some dude on the treadmill and just go over and stand by him, you know, and get a workout. Hey, could you hurry up? I got to be somewhere in a half an hour, you know. They don't even smell like smoke. The story is just off the charts, so cool all by itself, until you focus back in on that. Wait a minute, I threw 3 men in, but I see 4. Jesus came and joined these men in the flames? Really? I wonder how many other martyrs through history who were burned at the stake or burned by Nero to light his gardens. Maybe Jesus was much closer than we imagined. And when you're facing the flames of life, I'll bet Jesus is a lot closer than you realize. Same book, the book of Daniel, but now we're in chapter 6 with Daniel in the lion's den. This is Darius. He's kind of a king with an ego. Daniel's well known by this moment already. In fact, he has so distinguished himself, the king is about to make him second in command. This Jewish boy, he's about to make this Jewish boy second in all command of his kingdom because he's just so smart. His integrity is off the charts. He's loyal. It's just incredible. And so because of that, he's got enemies. Some other leaders in Darius's kingdom, they hate Daniel and they start plotting against him. And you know what? We can't get him on his integrity. You're never going to catch him doing anything wrong. The only way to trap him is to trap him with his God. And they come up with this scheme. Let's ask Darius to pass a law that nobody's allowed to pray to anyone but him for 30 days. They go to, oh, King Darius, you're so amazing. Let's not let anyone pray. And King Darius, not thinking this thing through, signs that in the law. No prayer except to me. 30 days. If you do this, you're going to be thrown into a lion's den. When Daniel gets the law, just like everybody else did, most everyone follows the law. He refuses. He doesn't change a thing. He goes home. He prays every day like he always has. he opens the window just like he always has, and he gets caught. They drag him to King Darius, and they say he broke the law. And King Darius suddenly realizes that he's been taken. He likes Daniel a lot, but it's a law. He can't show himself to be weak. And so they bind up Daniel, and they throw him in the lion's den. And then the king goes to the palace, but he has a sleepless night. I think he's sleepless because he realized that he got stuck within his own law and his own ego. I think Daniel spends a night with these lions, and he has a night of peace. Wait a minute, he's in the den and he has the peace. The king's in the palace, and he has no peace. Anyway, the next morning, the king runs to the den, has the stone removed, and he yells in, "Daniel, was your God able to save you?" And from the den he hears, "Yep." And they pull him out, and when the king examines him and sees there's not a scratch on him, nothing, all of a sudden the king's anger turns toward those men who set him up. And he takes those men, and he has them tied up, and he has them thrown into the lion's den, where the Bible says they were devoured before they even hit the ground. My old Sunday school teacher never told me that part of the story, because that is awesome. They were meow mix. Thank you, finally, a laugh. Oh my gosh, I can't believe it. That is an incredible story, and I've read that story, and a year ago when I was looking at this, something jumped out at me in that story. I've been in ministry for 40 years, and I never made the connection. I wasn't looking for Jesus in this story, and when I slowed down and I did, I was shocked. When Daniel was thrown into the lion's den, there's a stone involved. Look at verse 17. A stone was brought and placed over the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet ring and with the rings of his nobles, so that Daniel's situation might not be changed. They put a stone and a seal on it. Some of you are so smart, you're way ahead of me. That's exactly what they did at the tomb of Jesus. They put him in there, and they said he's a dead man. When they threw Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fire, they're dead men. Oh, but they came out alive. When they throw Daniel into the lion's den, he's a dead man. But he comes out alive. When they put Jesus into the tomb, they said he's dead. He's dead. And 3 days later, he comes out. Big stone, a seal around it, so that his circumstances might not change. Oh my goodness. How did I miss that all these years? There's all these other connections in these stories. There are connections to Jesus that are hidden in plain sight. You just need them pointed out to you. Are you ready? Unwavering faith in the Heavenly Father. So did Jesus. These 4 men had trust that God could deliver them. So does Jesus. They had courage and conviction in the face of societal pressures. When society was turning up the pressure, they had conviction and strength. So does Jesus. All 4 men are going to get a raw deal out of all of this. So did Jesus. All 4 men will face a trial with trumped up charges. So does Jesus. The ruler in each of these stories do not want to bring judgment against them, just like Pilate didn't want to bring judgment against Jesus, but he does. All 4 men were assumed dead. All 4 are delivered from death. All came out alive, and all 4 men are vindicated, and their God is exalted. Exactly how it is with Jesus. These Old Testament stories. You know what? When these guys started that day, they did not expect to become Bible heroes. They did not expect to become favorite children's stories. They did not expect that they were going to be Sunday school lessons for years. They just knew that they weren't going to bow to anyone but one God, their God. And they had unbelievable courage. Now that you have all the facts, what do you take with you today? Well, here's what hit me this week. I heard God saying to me, after reading and studying these stories, one phrase: I'll bring you through this. Some of you need to hear that today. You're facing fires that you don't want to face. You're afraid something's about to take a big chunk out of you. And what you need to hear from these stories is that God brings us through. Does it mean that life will be perfect and easy? It does not mean that. Does it mean that life will be painless? No. Does it mean you've cried your last tear? No. Does it mean that chemotherapy is over and you don't have to do it anymore? Not necessarily. All it does mean is that regardless of what comes, God gets me through. He delivers people throughout the Bible. He wants you to believe that He is a God who rescues. He rescued out of the fiery furnace Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He rescued out of the lion's den Daniel. He rescued out of the whale's belly Jonah. He rescued out of the prison Paul and Silas. He rescues. He brings us through. Through is one of God's favorite words. He brought them through the Red Sea. He brought them through the wilderness. He takes us through the valley of the shadow of death. In Isaiah 43, when you pass through waters, I will be with you. When you walk through fire, you will not be burned. That was written long before the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. When you walk through fire, I bring you through. It's interesting to me that when I look at these stories, God did not keep Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego from spending time in the furnace. He just rescued them from the fire. And He did not keep Daniel from a night in the lion's den, but He rescued them from the lion's jaws. And He did not keep Jesus from going to the cross, but He gave Him resurrection. The next thing on your plate just might take you out. And even if it does, God brings you through. The next healing that you're praying for, God may do it right here on earth, or He may wait for the ultimate healing and give it to you in heaven. Regardless, He's going to bring you through. The thing that you're struggling with the most right now, God's going to bring you through it somehow. Can our God save us this day from these things? Oh, you better believe He can. But even if He doesn't, I don't bow to anyone else. Because of my relationship to Jesus, I do not fear the fires of hell. Because of my relationship to Jesus, I do not fear Satan, who prowls like a lion, seeking whom he may devour. And because of my relationship to Jesus, I do not fear the tomb. God brings me through. And He'll bring you through too.